So, yes, we can. So, so are you okay? Can we go on so that I connect the audio?
Yes.
Okay. So we are taking off now. We can't hear you. So we can't hear
I
you.
know.
I'm showing PowerPoints now.
Dr. James Yeku, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. Dr. Sylvia Fernandez.
And Brian Rosenblum, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So let's begin. I'm Dr. Solomon Azumurana. I'm the program chair for this school. So let's just begin so that you can take on your presentation, Dr. James Yeku and Dr. Sylvia Fernandez, both of the University of Kansas, USA. So you can start with your presentation. We are happy to have you with us, and you are highly welcome. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so very much.
Okay,
Dr.
and Dr. Brian, Dr. Brian Rosenblum can stay at the background so that once you guys are through, it takes over. Thank you very much. You are highly welcome once again.
Sure. Okay, so thank you, Dr. Solomon. It's a delight to join you from Lawrence. Sylvia and I will be in charge of this particular session, and we're excited to have been invited. Can people see my screen?
Yes, we can see your screen.
Okay, great. So our presentation today is a bit theoretical, and my sense is that it's meant to be a series of provocations in relation to what we believe could be the promises and possibilities of an African digital humanities. And I'll just start basically by exploring what I believe to be the state of the field currently, especially when we think of what an African digital humanities is. And I say this more or less with a view to building on some of the previous thoughts and reflections from the earlier speakers, especially from the work of Professor Chibaka yesterday and some of the previous facilitators we have had today. So from the way I see it, I in the last 10 to 20 years or even farther back, we can think of two distinct areas of African digital humanities that have fascinated scholars. The most prominent of them seems to be linguistic data mining and computational text analysis. And you have a number of individuals, a lot of organizations on the continent based in different parts of Africa who are devoted to this kind of research. If you go on Google Scholar and other knowledge repositories, you find several articles on African linguistic forms on the internet. A lot of people may be interested in digital multiculturalism today, but I dare say that you have had several African scholars who have been doing this kind of research for a very long time. The organization by Tunde Adegbola, based in Lagos, African Languages, I think based in Ibadan, Lagos, basically, African Languages Technology Initiative, as far back as the 90s, was already committed to machine learning and translation and other forms of computational analysis of African languages, especially Yoruba and many other indigenous languages. It may not have been called digital humanities back then, but these people were already doing things that signal some kind of, early promises of digital humanities scholarship based in Nigeria. And of course, I also know that in recent years from South Africa, the work of Alora, the works of CEDHUL, all of these organizations support research in language technologies and other language-related studies. So there's a linguistic and computation test analysis dimension in African DH, but there's also the digital literary studies and cultural criticism that seems to also be very prominent around. A lot of people, I was part of an earlier session, somebody was asking for tools for literary analysis, and of course Voyant came up and a couple of other tools and platforms people could use for literary analysis. I think the work of Shola Denekon, the book on digital literature, African literature in a digital age, is one excellent example of this kind of scholarship in which digital technologies and literary and cultural forms come in an intersectional framework. And of course, the work of the Kenyan writer Nanjala Nyabola on digital democracy and analog politics is also important in this context. So you have test analysis using algorithmic protocols, you have digital literary studies or literary digital humanities. And of course, from an institutional perspective, you have a number of people who have been doing stuff just to make African DH more visible. The most popular, of course, is DASA, Digital Humanities Association from South Africa, and of course, the center in Lagos. I know there are other pedagogical possibilities in DH from Cameroon and other parts of Africa. I say all of this just to explore what is my own sense of the field. These narratives of origin, of course, are multivariate, and there are other contexts that it's possible I might have left out. But just for 1 minute, we could think about why all of this matter. And I would imagine that, like Professor Chibaka was saying, there's a need to make legible what we do in various communities, what's the relevance of DH to different communities in Africa. And I think one way we can do this is to take more seriously the need for collaboration with programmers and app developers in places like Yaba, close to Unilag, and just integrate these non-academic voices into the various projects and possibilities we think of DH in the academic environment. So beyond the institutions doing all of this work, I'm saying there are Africa-based programmers and individuals who use programming language like Python and many others, and they are doing stuff. This kind of work is important, and I want to suggest today that we need to be doing more to digitize different kinds of cultural heritage and historical forms in the country. Imagine, for instance, having a 3D visualizations of the Osun Osogbo grove, or even of slave routes in Badagry, or the ancient walls of Kano. This kind of research, I believe, matter because beyond language and literary analysis, beyond our ability to connect on social media, there's so much that we can understand and make available to others in open access web resources, especially in a country in which the value of historical materials is not well grounded. So for the next couple of minutes, I just want to focus on what I believe to be a dominant aspect of DH scholarship at the moment on the continent, and that's social media. I believe social media is an important architecture of knowledge, and it is one that has presented opportunities for people to do all kinds of what Kim Garland calls recovery work. And I'm thinking of recovery in terms of cultural forms of recovery, historical forms of recovery, and even self-recovery. The historical seems to be the most obvious. There are different accounts from Instagram to Twitter, and on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook that do all kind of historical, forms of documentation using these social media platforms. And I think that is really important to the extent that we think of people who use social media in a manner that wasn't originally intended. And Sylvia will be speaking more to this later from the perspective of micro digital humanities. But for now, I just want to emphasize the important work of using social media, in a way that helps our commitment to recovering our voice, recovering our agency. Social media therefore becomes this kind of socio-technical space for activism. And in this context, we can think about all the tweets, the millions and the millions of tweets during Bring Back Our Girls in 2014. And of course, in recent months, last year in particular, we had NSAS generating over 20 million tweets. Social media is not just the space where activism is possible, it's also been a space where a lot of people find community. So social media again as a space as a social technical space for community. I give you one example, Female In, probably one of the largest communities on Facebook, Finstas, they call them, Female in Nigeria. What does it mean to be female in Nigeria? A Facebook group with almost 2 million women from Nigeria and in recent years from many other parts of the world will come together to connect against oppressive heteropatriarchal norms. I think this is really important, what groups like Female In and other Finstas do. And it's, again, speaks to the value of social media as a space that generates tons and tons of, information that could be beneficial for us as social media or DH researchers, if you like. But of course, we also need to think about the large scale of data generated in these archival communities, in spaces like Female In, and just think about them in terms of the value of this information. With all the millions of tweets from Bring Back Our Girls, all the millions of tweets from NSAS, I think it is important, and this for me is one of the promises of African DH. We need to be able to get to a point in which we become sensitive to the fact that the internet companies that make these social technical spaces possible also capture profits from the data we produce. They capture data from our social interactions. And why the digital divide is real, something you hear about in African digital discourses. I think sometimes it obscures us to the labors of the digitally connected in Africa and how vulnerable they may be to the machinic exploitation of our data. I think we need to be talking about this kind of issues more. So today, as I begin to bring this together, my point is we need to be talking about data colonization as we talk about the use of tools, the use of platforms that are created by ourselves or created by others to recover the past, to present new forms of information and knowledge, and to document historical heritage. We do need to be talking about the implication of the costs of being connected. Sometimes we are too celebratory of these platforms and we forget that the digital moment as or results in a major issue, and that's that our relations with online data could become colonial. And yeah, I'm drawing from the work of Nick Caudry and Ulysses Mejias, who wrote recently in relation to data colonialism, that we need to think about how our relationship with platforms, with technologies and tools have colonial resonances that serve the purpose of capital. In other words, new infrastructures of connections embedded in our lives in the last couple of years have also meant that there's an annexation of human reality to capital that is based on the circulation of the circulation and use of data. I find this kind of analysis very scanty in African DH, and I would imagine that this is one of the directions in which we need to go. If you the work of Nanjala again in Ebola, the work on digital democracy and analog politics makes reference to the work of Cambridge Analytica in the Kenyan elections of a few years ago. And I think this is something you have had in other aspects of African political spaces where Israeli firms from the UK and the US try to hack the political space and process. And for me, they signal the importance of understanding the political dimensions of technology. So if data colonialism is real, the colonization of data, if we are interested in the documentation of our tweets, our data, when we like things on Facebook, the massive amounts of information African digital subjects are producing, if we're interested in those spaces from the perspective of data colonization or data colonialism, if we're interested in the capture of profit from our social relations or from our activist engagements or just community engagement in the digital, perhaps we need to be thinking about alternative infrastructures of knowledge, alternative spaces of activism, alternative spaces that help us to archive the past, to document memory and protests for forms of social justice. In this regard, I'm thinking of the popular hashtag again, NSATs, and how basically while a lot of people online were sharing hashtags, the hashtag NSATs, some other people were interested in building web spaces that also curate the stories. So rather than share stories and hashtags only on social media, the creators of this group, for instance, of this web space, NSATs.com, invite people to document their stories of brutality, of police brutality on the platform. This particular example, I think, is important because it gives you an excellent example of a minimalist approach to the work of archiving memory, archiving and telling stories of police brutality and other forms of social injustice. So we transition from the hashtag as an ephemeral media form to a web-based platform that does the same thing even more. Now, the problem with this again, and I think Brian will be speaking to the issue of sustainability later, how to sustain our digital project. The problem with this particular web space again is its inability to stay online for so long. I checked the websites recently and it wasn't even available anymore. I had to go back to I had to use the Wayback Machine, the Internet Archive, to get this page. But again, it's important we see the value in how a page like this gets us to think beyond social media, especially again because of the implications of data colonization. Apart from NSAS.com, you have the popular, but when I say popular in the context of those who may be in the know of this kind of project, the project on police brutality in Nigeria by the journalist Kemi Falodun. This again is another important work that is really important as we think about what it means to document police brutality or even any kind of injustice in the country. And I think Professor Chibaka spoke to this point, says they're making DH legible in our communities. What's the importance of the digital humanities? This work, the project on the project on police brutality in Nigeria really speaks to that. The connection, the praxis of DH and its relevance to communities. As a non-academic initiative, the project on police violence is a repository that exists, quote, in order to help us better understand, according to the creators, the magnitude and devastating impact of police violence in Nigeria. The project makes visible the, quote, avalanche of reported cases beyond a small fraction that becomes trending topics on social media. So this particular project positions itself as an alternative to social media beyond what trends for a brief period of time on social media. Here you have a repository that has as its aim the documentation of information on police brutality, telling the stories of victims, and basically serving as a space of remembrance. And I think that's really really important. One of the things I find fascinating about this project is how it bears witness to abuse, how it, memorializes the dead, if you like, and performs human rights by staging images of the dead. And there are a lot of implications to this, especially in terms of how we can hold the police the police accountable in the country, and in a lot of ways, how this project continues to make visible the absence of those who have been victims of police violence in the past. One final thing I just want to say before Xavier takes over is that a major promise of African digital humanities is the opportunity to shun, pessimistic narratives of technological constraints in African local contexts, and critically respond to the various tech spaces that are springing up in many places all over the continent. While, again, the digital divide is real, I think it is fast becoming a mythology, if you like, and one that obscures the important work being done by many people who are connected. I think we do need to build repositories such as the Police Brutality in Nigerian project, the answers.com project. But of course, we must remain alert to the work of internet companies who capture profit and value from what we do online. Our collective labors in African DH, I believe, means we can go beyond sharing news stories or curating historical memory on spaces like social media, and actually make connections with non-academic technological spaces that can enrich what we do. This, I believe, is important, especially when you think about the importance of micro digital humanities or even large-scale digital humanities that may be funded if we get government and other people to invest. In the meantime, without the political support in terms of funding and what have you by government and other agencies in the country, I think we have a thriving tech space in Lagos, especially, that we can draw upon for important collaboration. How those kind of interventions can make possible other forms of DH work is something we need to reflect on. Perhaps we could talk about that in the Q&A, but Sylvia will take it up from here just to bring some other context to this and foreground the importance of doing what some have called micro digital humanities. Sylvia.
Thank you, James. Hello, everyone. I'm happy to continue the presentation, and I'm gonna share my screen to continue, which in my talk, I'm gonna, is it working? Yeah, let me put it on the.
Do you want to try it again, Sylvia? I just stopped sharing my own screen. Okay, good.
Is it working, James?
Yeah, I think it's fine. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Great. So I'm gonna speak about continuing with the presentation of James. I have been working on what is Borderlands Digital Humanities, and taking it from what Elika Ortega proposes, she's talking about paying attention to the local practices. What does that mean, local practices? It's the practices that you're being doing regionally, locally. So for instance, what James just presented about this digital archives, memory, history, anecdotes that are hashtags that are happening on Facebook, on Instagram, on TikTok, to pay attention to that. Like how is people creating their own alternative archives in which they're trying to collect what sometimes institutions are not paying attention to, or even corporations are not paying attention, because sometimes all these knowledges are incomplete, right? It's not a whole archive that can be trespassed to a platform. There are many gaps, and people is sharing through time, about photographs, about different anecdotes, photographs about the present and the past, or particular hashtags that happen in a moment and later on another hashtag takes over. But a lot of these hashtags, we're also seeing it that come from local knowledges, like people from the place or from the particular movement are producing those hashtags. So it's a it's embedded in very local knowledges that are important to consider. But what happens when all these local practices are being reposted or are living in commercial platforms that are just looking for from a very capitalist perspective, or that are not even valuing the local knowledges from particular regions in the world? So it's important to think about that. What kind of platforms are people using to create what I'm telling you about alternative archives, alternative ways of documentation and recovery? Within the aspect of digital humanities, Rupika Rizam talks about the importance to take a look at micro digital humanities approach, which, and I'm going to read here, it's validates scholarly output that does not require digital humanities centers, big data, large data sets, and access to high performance computing. As an intervention in local digital humanities, it takes places high value on working with available resources, however small. This approach begins by asking what those digital humanities look like for our community, our institutions, our students. So in this sense, it is important to question the way that digital humanities it's being defined and go outside of the box and see what else it's been doing, that it's sometimes not called digital humanities, but is doing the work that it's important in the sense of recovering, that sometimes it's independent scholars or it's a group of person that it's collecting these images and these stories on Facebook, or it's a big community that was doing digital activism, taking a look at all these practices that are being sometimes outside of institutions. What is going to happen with all that work? I'm going to ask you, like, what is going to happen if that Instagram, like, nobody else takes care of that Instagram anymore? Or if that if there's a site on Facebook that Facebook starts charging people to have access to it, what is going to happen with all that material, with all those archives, with all that data that it's already out there? It's going to be lost. Or sometimes there's a lot of projects that just few people know about them. There's a lot of initiatives that just a circle of people know about them and use them, which in the sense of defining or thinking about African DH, a lot of that, it's out. It's not being considered. So it is important to take a look outside of that box and think about those local practices. What should be part of digital humanities? What are those micro digital humanities that are not receiving these big grants or this a lot of attention, but are contributing to the digital cultural record of Africa? So speaking about this, it is important also to take a look at what kind of collaboration can be proposed. What kind of communities can be constructed within this? So if there's a group on Facebook that it's working towards the recovery of memory of a particular period in time, and they have the willingness of collaborating with a regional institution or working transnationally or working globally with other organizations, what can be done to maintain the local practices, but think about the preservation, think about the sustainability, think about how this project can be more accessible for others. How can we add more knowledge to a particular project that started small? So that means like creating metadata, thinking about what kind of platforms can be used to have a backup, to make it a community project, but at the same time, an institutional project. That sometimes we don't rely on these commercial platforms, that we don't know what's going to happen with our data, that we're not able to control what we are producing, which is very important. As I told you, there's a lot of this knowledge that others are not considering as part of preservation initiatives. So all that, it's important for us as the community to take a look and see how we want to define them, how we want to describe them, with who we want to collaborate, that it's going to take care of that information. It's not just considering for making money or sell it or leave it in the on the side and forget about it. So that's very important to consider, and I argue that it's important to know with who you collaborate. Collaborations that can be ethical, that can consider the priorities of the people that it's working within these initiatives, to create your own communities, a group of people that it's interested in a particular topic, to start learning about different tools, to start questioning what it's out there, and to define what you want to do. There, I'm gonna go ahead and show you some few projects. Are not from Africa, but it's an example of this, considering these local knowledges, these local practices, and start creating a project that it takes time. It's not gonna be done in 1 year and will be perfect. It's also this importance of learning as they go within discussions and different considerations to make this project accessible for the communities as well as from different academic audiences. So there is this project called Huellas Incómodas. It is a project that it didn't initiate it as a digital humanities project. It was a group of students in a class in Mexico, in Toluca, Mexico, close to Mexico City, that were involved in a student feminist movement. And they started, they expressed their concerns with the professor that a lot of the stories that were being discussed about this movement was about vandalism, was about students being rebels, that they didn't knew how to take care of the cultural patrimony of the city. But at the other side, students were mad. They had a lot of anger because there were a lot of gender violence, a lot of abuses from people of power that nobody was speaking about. That there was a feminicide happened, and it was impugned. So they had a lot of feminist interventions in the public spaces, and all that, it's being erased, right? You can go and protest or write ni una menos or no more violence, and the next day the institution or those in powers will erase that. And that memory is not existent anymore. It is ephemeral. So the students wanted to document all that together with Rosario, that was a professor supporting it. They didn't have, the institution wouldn't support them at all to create this, to invest time, to invest in a platform of it. So in here, it's what it comes about, collaboration. They started working with the Institute of Digital Research in the Humanities at the University of Houston, and it was considered to use Omeka. It is a platform that provides open source web publishing for sharing digital collections and creating media-rich online exhibits. So in here, Huellas Incómodas, it's a digital repository that it's inviting students, activists to submit their images. Why? Because a lot of this material is just living on Facebook. It's just living on Instagram. It's even living on WhatsApp, where they will create all these groups. So it needed to be together in a place to contextualize what is happening and to have a backup of all this material for future generations to understand this movement, that it's a very local movement. It's not the big picture of the feminism in Mexico. So that's one of the examples that I want you to consider, and I will share you all these links for you to explore the projects. There is another one that it's called United Fronteras, which is a project that it's using the platform WAX, a minimal computing project for producing digital exhibitions focused on longevity, low cost, and flexibility. This project is creating transporter digital archives about material and projects that are using any sort of digital technologies to document the US-Mexico borderlands, for instance. And what it aims is to create a community in which we can talk with different creators in what kind of technologies they're using, what kind of methods they're following to create their projects, what is being needed to also question this very stereotype understanding of the US-Mexico border and bring other stories into light. What are many projects that have disappeared from the digital record because they didn't have the budget to continue paying the website, that are out there and people don't know about this project? So what United Fronteras is doing is that creating different exhibits of geopolitical border regions and making them accessible, creating some metadata for people to search for these projects and learn more about this region from multiple perspectives and maintain the digital memory of this region. It is using WAX, which is a platform that you don't rely on commercial platforms. It lives on your server. It takes time to learn. It's a learning curve, but at the end, you're able to control it. There's another project that it's Caravans of Gold Fragments in Time, which is using WAX. And this one, for instance, it's in Arabic and French, as well as in English, right? For also thinking about different languages within these exhibits to present them in different places. So moving into the last example that I want to show you, it's Masamakudi people, which is using this platform called Mukurtu. Mukurtu is a free, mobile, and open source platform built with indigenous communities to manage and share digital cultural heritage. It works to build platforms that foster relationship of respect and trust. So this project, for instance, it's creating an archive of recordings that are being transcribed about a particular indigenous community in Maine in the United States. And I'm just going to read here what they talk about, which is important, that it's the Masakudu wax cylinder sound recording were made in Calais, Maine in 1890. They were first returned to the Pasakudi community in the 1980s. David Frankis, our ancestral language specialist, was able to listen and transcribe 4 of these cylinders. In 2014, we began a new project with local contexts and the American Folk Life Center to listen again to these recordings because the sound quality had been improved. This new project became the impetus of this digital archive. We wanted to put the recordings in a Masakudu control archive where our community can listen to them and add a Masakudic transcriptions and English translations in our own time. So as you see, these methods are being considered who's going to have access to them, what has to be public and what doesn't have to be public, in what languages are they being represented. And that's very, very important to it. So I'm just going to close this presentation with the importance of understanding digital humanities with local practices, with these micro digital humanities that are shaping the digital cultural record and that need to be preserved, which I think a big, big thing to preserve them and sustaining them, it's to work in collaboration to create these communities for these people to define what they want rather than to be that rely on other platforms that can miss important information. So coming back together with James and I, we want to open up the conversation with some questions that doesn't have to be answered right now, but it is important to think about them. What happens with the data shared in social media? Where it goes? How can we intervene so that we don't lose our data? What are the micro DH projects in African DH? Are you able to think about some of them that need work or that need these conversations of how to sustain them? How can this material be preserved and sustained? What kind of methods can be proposed grounded in local practices? And lastly, what kinds of collaborations and communities are needed? So as I mentioned you, there is important to think about local, regional, national, transnational collaborations that can engage in a broader conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. James Yeku and Dr. Sylvia Fernandez. It's now time for us to take question and answer discussion. So those that have questions from what you have listened to, okay, thank you. And do you want to take the questions as they come, or you want to take them all together? How do you want us to proceed?
And then we should take them.
The way they come?
No, let's add them
Together, okay. So just take notes as they ask their questions. Thank you once again for that engaging presentation.
Okay, thank you. My name is Kuma from University of Lomé, Togo. Thank you for your presentation. My question is to know about the impact of DH, okay, on the colonial history in Africa, because you talk of digitalizing cultural heritage. Okay, if we should apply local digital in Africa, how can this impact, okay, or affect the rehistoricization of African colonial, okay, or history? If I will repeat this thing. Okay, let me take it again. My question is to know how local DH will impact African colonial history. Yeah.
Did you get Dr. James Yeku, Dr. Sylvia Fernandez? Did you get that question?
Yes.
Question.
Yeah, we got a question. Yeah, we got a question.
I just want to confirm that you got the drift of that question.
Yes,
Yeah.
we did. Yes, we did.
Okay, thank you. Who else? Okay, thank you, Elijah.
Thank you for your presentation. My name is Ganiat Abbas. I'm from University of Lagos. My question is on translation. I would like to know the impact of digital humanities, or how digital humanities can help us in translating novels or texts from African languages into European language, let's say from Yoruba to French or Yoruba to English. I would like to know how digital humanities can help us do that.
Thank you. The first person is from Lomé, Togo. The second person is from University of Lagos, Nigeria. Who else? Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. My name is John Adebayo. I am from Chrisland University in Ogun State. Sir, in digitizing the local content that you talk about, I want to ask, how do we handle the issue, ethical issues, specifically copyright? Who owns it? How do we handle it? Because it's an emerging issue in digitizing local content. Thank you so much, sir.
Those in room 307, Dr. Aja will compile those. No. Okay. Is there, so that we know those that want to ask. Okay. 307 is the. Okay. Anybody here? Okay, so we get back to you, Dr. Yeku and Dr. Fernandez. Can we just respond to those three questions while others ruminate on the questions they are about to ask?
No questions, sir. No, thank you. Thank you.
I mean, can you respond to the questions that have already been asked?
Yes,
Okay.
I think we can do that. Okay, so I wonder if Sylvia would like to speak to the question on ethics and, community sourcing of projects and those kind of issues, which I think is really important. And all the questions are indeed important. The first question from the colleague from Lomé seeks to understand the impact of DH on colonial history in Africa, which I think is a very important one also. And I would just say that there's so much about our historical past that we can understand even better if we employed digital humanities tools and methods. And that's the first thing that comes to mind. Obviously, my reference to data colonialism also embeds in it the issue of historical colonialism itself. Because when you say our relationship with data today is becoming colonial, especially for the purpose of profit for some people, we're thinking about how historical colonialism also worked. It was about the large-scale capture of resources and territories for the economic expansion of a few people. And that's what, in a way, is mirrored through data colonialism. But that's not necessarily the focus of your question, as I understand it. You're interested in how the colonial past can be understood using data tools. And that's really important. My sense of that is beyond colonialism itself. African history did not begin with colonialism. A lot of people fell in love, had children in Africa before colonialism. We can talk about those people. We can talk about their lives. We can talk about many things people did before colonialism came. My point is we must not reduce African history to the colonial period, to the encounter with colonialism. It's important we are able to tell our stories even before colonialism itself. So we can go back to the Great Wars of Zimbabwe. We can talk about the Oyo Empire long before the white man arrived. We can talk about different aspects of our pre-colonial past, not necessarily to romanticize that past, but just to be able to understand how society functioned and evolved even before colonial encounter. And of course, the aspect of colonial violence we may also want to understand. It's the implication of the fact of colonial violence cannot be contested, right? So there are different aspects of that encounter with the West we may want to talk about. Chinua Achebe and many other cultural producers have documented those for us in fiction. DH offers us an opportunity to retell those kind of stories. You may decide to go back to recently I saw the house Lord Lugard lived, I think in Kaduna, on some platform, I think on Facebook. And you could be interested in, just going to that kind of space and creating some kind of visualization of that architectural space, which can therefore become an architectural space of violence, of colonial violence. So that's one way, just one of many ways a DH2 becomes relevant in telling that kind of story. But my worry with that is how it reinscribes a particular kind of knowledge. I would rather be interested in telling the stories of communities that survived and their resilience in the face of colonial violence than tell the story of the house in which Lord Lugard lived. In other words, even if DH and the digital humanities generally become relevant to recapturing colonial history in Nigeria, we must also be careful about what aspect of that history we want to tell and how we want to tell the history. But of course, DH tools are relevant in capturing that important past. And I would imagine that just by attending a summer school like this, I'm thinking about what kind of tools we can learn in order to capture stories from the past. Is one way, to start that conversation going in the right direction. The second question about how DH tools help translation. This is an important one. It's ongoing. A lot of African languages need some kind of NLP to start with, natural language processing. I know some guys are trying to look at how Python and Augustine Farrell has spoken at this event. I know he and I have been in conversation. I know a lot of people in different places on the continent and outside the continent are thinking about these kind of questions. Kola Tubosune is doing important work in this regard. They may not be focused on translation per se, but at least natural language processing, linguistic, the process of digitizing indigenous languages, whether endangered or not, just getting our indigenous languages recognized in the mainstream technological spaces is where to begin. And I don't know if that would help the important work of translating a Yoruba novel into English. But I do know that it's the right direction is to start with things like NLP and just getting the language to a point in which they are recognized for that process. If somebody writes a journal article in Spanish today and wants it in French, they may have to do the important work of, manually transcribing them. There's certain work a machine will not do for you. And I know colleagues here in the West would do that, as a matter of fact, translating articles from, say, English to Spanish, and they still have to do this themselves. So while there is the promise of machinic translations, we may not have gotten to that stage where a wholesale novel will be translated into English or French from Yoruba by using a machine. We have not gotten to that stage, I think. But even before we think of that stage, we need to think of having our own languages becoming dominant, say, in more digital spaces, not just at home, but also in the West. We're not even at that yet. I don't know if Sylvia wants to speak to the first two questions, but very importantly, the question on ethics and collaborating with communities.
Yes, thank you, James. Thank you so much for those three questions are very important. And just to add something for the first question, I think within digital humanities, it's the possibility and the potential is to question that colonial history, right? It's not to replicate what has been prioritized and when you go to the archive, what has been preserved. It's to take digital humanities and work on what it's missing in order to tell the other stories that have been aside, had been marginalized from this colonial and who are telling the stories. And that's why it's very important to also take a look at what has been preserved and analyze it from other perspectives. And that's what digital tools also allows you to take a look at other communities that were part of this colonial period and see how their stories can come into the dialogue rather than just thinking about those in power, that's how history has been constructed. It's more about questioning what it's missing, questioning how to tell other stories. In regard to the languages, it's also important to think about digital humanities in creating tools that can center all these varieties of languages and that can respect their locality and their uniqueness, right? If they have accents, if they have other symbols, to think about tools that can also respect that and don't erase that. And that's very important within the institutions, but also for users. Just take a look at Siri or Google Translator. How there's a lot of they don't in my culture in Spanish and in the border, they don't when you speak in Spanglish, Siri won't recognize Spanglish. Siri won't recognize my English, that it's my second language. There will be a lot of errors in it. So that's why it's important to also think about digital humanities to push towards the recognition and the respect of the variety of languages. And that's why it's also important to create projects that are not just in one language, because mainly it will be on the dominant language. How can we add other languages so that people can understand a DH project from different languages? And it's more work, and it's also that important to push towards recognizing the extra labor of creating projects in different languages. So that's a very important work that needs to be considered and to bring the importance of why is it important to create multilingual projects and design tools from that perspective. And to just the last question about collaborating, it's an issue. Like, take what digital humanities it's allowing you, it's to question how people have owned or gatekeep material. And when you want to map a project and you're not allowed to digitize that archive, that's a big question. Who is going to be able to map it? The ones that own that archive sometimes, not communities outside of institutions that will like to interact with that archive, for instance. So it's important to think about other ways of copyrights when we're working with digital humanities, because it would change the dynamics of working with material when you're integrating them into digital tools. But at the same time, it's also who needs to have access to this, because capitalism, it's a big thread that can take away all these local knowledges and archives. So that's why it's important to intervene and decide what kind of methods, what kind of structures you want for your material and for your knowledges, rather than relying on big corporations, big powers to take hold of that. And just a good example of it, I work in a project that it's called Borderlands Archives Cartography, and it's mapping the newspapers produced in the US-Mexico border from 1808 to 1930. If you go into that map, there are some newspapers that you don't have access because they're living in Redex or in Newsbank, which are collections that you have to have a subscription. There's other newspapers that are still in microfilm that belong to Mexico, but there are in institutions in the US. Who's able to travel to the US? Those border communities are able to have access to it. We couldn't digitize that to add them to the map. We had to go to the institution and take a look at those newspapers in that place without taking them out. There's a lot of other newspapers that are not even digitized because the US or Mexico have given priority to the capitals or to what represents the national history, rather than these histories that are binational, that are showing newspapers in different languages. So that's why it's important to think about what kind of copyrights are needed when you're working with digital humanities, because it changes from a physical archive to a digital archive, for instance.
You, Dr. Fernandez. Once again, we appreciate your presentation with Dr. James Yeku. Can we please give them another round of applause? Can we please give them?
Sorry, just to say hi to you guys. You are doing marvelously well. We thank you so much. James and Sylvia, thank you so much. This is Tunde talking to you. Thank you so much for just taking time off to be with us and then to actually share your thoughts with us. The Lagos audience is quite excited, and we've learned so much from you. I want to thank you. We hope that you'll be able to join us again when we invite you. Thank you so much, and then please do have a great time. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
So we'll move to the next presentation. Managing. No. Please, let's move on to the next. Managing and sustaining your digital humanities projects. On hand to present this is Bran Rosenblum, also from the University of Kansas. We have a little thing. Dr. Bran Rosenblum is the co-director, Institute for Digital Research in the Humanities in the University of Kansas. Bran Rosenblum, I hope you can hear me.
Yes.
And I hope I'm doing a good job about pronouncing your name.
Perfect. Yes, thank you. Well, greetings, everyone. It's really a pleasure and an honor for me to be here joining you from Kansas. As you heard, my name is Brian Rosenblum. I'm a librarian here at the University of Kansas and the co-director of our Institute for Digital Research in the Humanities. And I'm colleagues with Sylvia and James, whom you've just heard from. And I'm really pleased that several of us from Kansas, including our colleague Kaylin tomorrow, are able to join you. And Sylvia and James, that was a great presentation. I really learned a lot, and I'm not sure if I can follow it up, but I'm going to try a little bit. My session will be a little bit more practical in nature, and let me just try to share my screen. Let's see. I'm getting a message that says the browser can't access my screen. Let's see. I don't know. I'm getting I'm not sure how I can share this. I just keep getting an error message.
Ryan, is your presentation on Chrome or Firefox?
It's on Firefox. Let's see.
Maybe download your slides and share from your computer, from your desktop.
Well, it's also not letting me do it from my PowerPoint either. Let me try one more thing.
We'll shift to Chrome or some other browser.
Well, I don't know. I just get a message that says the browser can't access your screen. Try capturing a different screen, but I'm trying different screens and it doesn't work. So I can just talk through this. I can actually maybe paste in my a link.
Or Ryan, do you want to give me access and I can try if I can share it?
That's a good idea.
Oh, okay. And so I'm not sure what to do, but I'll just go ahead without the slides since I can't seem to share them. But I've pasted a link. And also pasting in a link to the different resources.
Hello, Brian. Hello, Brian. Can you hear me?
Sharing.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Yes, I think I can see your screen.
Brian, I just shared your screen.
I'm sorry?
I just shared your presentation now.
Oh, that's great. Okay. Thank you. Okay. So, let me reorganize my notes here. Okay, so thank you, James. My session today is going to cover principles and practices to help sustain a digital project over time. So in other words, strategies and some resources that you can use to help ensure that your digital project remains accessible and usable into the future. So it's actually quite a complicated topic and not something that can really be addressed in 30 minutes. And also, since every project has a unique combination of goals, data, resources, funding, and institutional support and audience, we can't really make specific recommendations here, such as what platform to use or how often I should back up my data. My goals here are simply going to be to stress the importance of thinking about sustainability and long-term plans for your digital projects, and even to start thinking about, just as you're beginning the project, to start to think about how you want the project to end. And this can be for large and small, micro or local projects, as we've just heard Sylvia and James discuss, or for large international collaborations. I also will present just some basic principles and strategies, and we'll discuss and point you to some further resources that I hope can be useful to you as you plan your projects. So I also want to make sure that we have time for questions and discussion. So I'll talk for about 30 minutes, and then we can open up for questions and answers, or discussion, rather. A couple of other things. The main focus of the resources that I'll be talking about is on public-facing, web-based digital projects. This could be like collections of objects, digital archives, a digital edition of a literary text, a blog, interactive websites such as discussion forums or crowdsourced projects. But the principles should be applicable to other types of work as well. And finally, just of course, my perspective here is formed by my location here in the US at a large research institution with all the access to resources, infrastructures, and working conditions that come along with that. So there will be different levels of access, infrastructure, and support in your own circumstances. And so the solutions and specific approaches you may take in terms of thinking about sustainability may be different, but I hope that these principles and ideas and resources will still be useful. So James, you can move on to the next slide. So first, I guess just to talk a little bit about what we mean by sustainability. And there's a few different facets of this, but basically I'm thinking about the long-term viability of your project. Who is going to take responsibility for maintaining it over time? How are they going to do that? And how can we arrange things to make that task as easy as possible and to give your project the most chance to meet its longer-term goals? Sustainability has become increasingly important within the digital humanities communities in the last few years. I mean, it's always been important, but most of the attention on it was kind of limited to the library world, because libraries have that responsibility to think about the long-term preservation of scholarship. But I would say in the last 3 or 4 years in particular, we've seen a lot of increased activity in this area of sustainability, and I'll talk about a few of these initiatives. There's a few reasons that it's taken a while and it hasn't received the attention of some other aspects of digital humanities. One is that it's not the fun and exciting part of digital humanities. It's much more, conservative in kind of activities you do. You're focusing on backups, documentation, project management, memorandum of agreement, things like that. Funding agencies, at least in the United States, often emphasized innovation, new technologies, experimentation, development of new tools, and not so much the not funding initiatives just to keep an already established project going. But now we have an increased activity and urgency, partly because I think we have several generations of digital projects behind us. Institutions that are tasked with preserving these are realizing the high cost of that in terms of technical infrastructure and staffing. And they're looking for policies and technologies and approaches to be able to effectively take on that role. And sadly, there are many projects that are no longer available. And we heard about that quite a bit in the last presentation. Projects that are lost to us, perhaps they exist in some sort of digital afterlife in the Internet Archive or on servers somewhere, but often they're just no longer accessible at all. A couple of examples I was just thinking of as I was preparing these slides. I just, at the latest Digital Humanities Conference in 2020, there was a presentation on looking at digital scholarly editions. And according to their study I don't have the exact figures here, but out of 470 or so digital editions that they looked at, 376 of them were no longer on the web, or at least not where they were originally located. And so there are broken links. The average life of those editions was about 8.5 years. So that's a lot of work that has disappeared. And my colleague Amy Earhart has also, and others have also documented how much of the great activity in the early days of the web, where individuals were putting online recovered texts and images and documents, and really kind of seeing the potential for the internet and the web to recover material that had been remained invisible or unknown. So there was this great amount of activity, but because a lot of those were done outside of institutional channels or with not much resources or much forethought about how to preserve those, many of those sites have also disappeared. So that's a lot of scholarly labor that is lost and unaccounted for, and it's also a loss of digital cultural heritage and kind of spaces of remembrance, as James mentioned in his previous presentation. So while thinking about sustainability may not be as fun as thinking about a new project, developing a new tool, it is important. Next slide, I think. Okay, so well, we kind of know this. There are, why did those sites disappear? There are a lot of different reasons, but it basically comes down to things change and things can go wrong. People change jobs. If you have a digital project at your institution, for instance, and you get a new job and move to a new institution, who does your project go with you? Is your new institution willing to support it? Does your old institution want to support it? Technology itself never rests. There's always updates and new tools and softwares being upgraded. Those all have to be maintained. Otherwise, the project itself may break, the technical infrastructure. Projects themselves grow and evolve over time as audience changes or as new data is available or new types of new goals, the scope can increase. Funding comes and goes. Projects are also not ever really done. Often we all have these checklists of things that we need to go through, and we feel good when we tick off a checklist, but we have this illusion that once we get through the checklist, it's all going to be done. But as anyone who's worked on a digital project knows, that's just an illusion. There's always more to do unless you carefully scope that at the beginning. Sometimes it's a matter of using the wrong technology. Using Dropbox, for instance, for a backup is good. It may be useful in the short term, but not necessarily in the long term. And then there are just the kind of natural laws. Things tend towards disorder, and anything that can go wrong will go wrong. Something that certainly applies to technology. Okay, next slide. So what I'm going to do the rest of this talk is just talk about a couple of different initiatives and attempts to sort of get our heads around what is needed to sustain digital projects. So the first one I'll talk about is called the Socio-Technical Sustainability Roadmap. Then I'm going to talk about another initiative called the Endings Project. And then I'm going to talk not about an initiative, but just one example of an important decision point in digital projects, which is choosing the platform that you use, and look at some of the issues there. So I'll go through each of those sections next. Okay, so the Socio-Technical Sustainability Roadmap. This is an initiative coming out of the University of Pittsburgh in the last 3 or 4 years. One of its really key points is that it recognizes that a project's social infrastructure must be addressed alongside the technical infrastructure in order to successfully sustain the digital work over time. So what the roadmap is a set of 13 modules, 13 activities that project teams can walk through to help really focus on the goals of their project, the scope, and then develop some concrete actions and resources for what they need to do to maintain that. So it's divided into 3 parts. Module A, which is a project survey, where you kind of define the scope of the project, and then right at the very beginning of your planning, the second module is thinking about the end of the project, how long you want it to last. Projects, it distinguishes digital projects from analog projects. So as a librarian, I work with a lot of people that come in to want digital projects, and most of them, and including myself, when I'm thinking about projects, I don't really naturally think about the end of the project. We just kind of assume we want it to live indefinitely. The roadmap suggests we do something else. So it suggests we think in terms of 3-year chunks. We can't plan. We have no idea what things will look like in 10 years if our project is sustainable, but 3 years is a more reasonable time. So if we can decide where we want our project to be in 3 years and have it in that state where we can then at 3 years or so revisit it and move it to the next stage, to keep actively developing it, or to archive it if that's the case. Then it asks you to think about your audience, who the project is designed for, and using the answers to those questions, you can figure out the sustainability priorities, which are the parts of your project without which it wouldn't be your project. So a website might have lots of functionality. It might allow for annotations, for people to contribute content, to make comments, to do complex searching. But that may not be the for your audience and your goals of your project. It might just be that the data is available. That might be the key element. So when you're thinking of your sustainability plan, some of those other things might be nice to have, but they're not necessarily essential to preserve. On the other hand, perhaps the project is all about crowdsourcing and discussion. So in which case, then that might be the key sustainability priority to think about preserving. And then wrapping up Module A, it focuses a lot on the importance of documentation. I'll talk about that more in a minute. Then it asks you to think about staffing and technology, to assign, for technology, it divides that into three, asks you to think about three different aspects of your project: the data, the software, and the hardware, the staff resources that you have available, and to kind of really pinpoint roles, individuals with certain responsibilities. And then Module C takes all of that thinking and brainstorming that you've done and helps you create a very practical plan for working with metadata, for thinking about access, for thinking about levels of preservation. Next slide. So again, I'm just going to go through very briefly 2 or 3. Well, I've said some of these already, but some of the key points of the roadmap. It thinks of projects as being in one of 3 different stages of development. There's the active creation stage, where you're developing the project or migrating it to a new platform, adding content. There's the ongoing maintenance, where the essential project is up and running. It's not changing much, but it needs to be kept functional and going, maybe updating some content. And then there's the retirement, the end of the project, and thinking about how you want that project to end, what features you want to preserve, and where it might be archived. And so you may want to try to preserve the entire functionality of the site. That might be difficult. You may want to take screenshots that document the project and archive those somewhere. It all depends on the audience and the long-term goals and the resources available. Again, it asks you to think about your project in 3-year chunks to identify the most essential priorities, and to identify and document individual and institutional partners and their responsibilities. Next slide. And I'm just going to spend 1 more minute on the roadmap, because one of the most important things that it talks about is the importance of effective documentation. So without documentation, you can't really effectively sustain your project. And you know, if you put away a project for 6 months and come back to it, you don't know. You have to figure out everything again. So it offers some specific strategies that it's worth reading through. Keeping the number of where the documentation is itself archived, keeping the number of locations of that small, keeping the structure simple, backing up your documentation, using different channels for distinguishing between working documents and communication versus or between drafts and communication and decision making, and actual documents that reflect a decision. And it has a lot of practical tips, like knowing that email is not the place for documentation. It may be the place for exchange of ideas, but once a decision's made, that should be documented and placed in the documentation along with the rest of the project. So a lot of useful tips and a ton of resources as you go through the module, though there's many links and resources that help you walk through this process. The next slide. So the next project I'll talk about is called the Endings Project. This is from the University of Victoria in Canada. And I find this a little bit too prescriptive, and it doesn't really address the social aspect of sustainability, but it does focus a lot on the technological aspect, especially for those projects that have work a lot with code and software development. So this project is just getting underway. It's called the Endings Project because it is focused on ending projects, how you conclude a digital project, how you preserve them, and how you maintain them for long-term usability. It's developing a set of principles to follow that make it that help enable that kind of archiving, and they've also developed some code to help transform dynamic sites into static sites, which I'll talk about in a few minutes. But that is one approach to archiving projects. It asks you, you can go ahead to the next slide. So it thinks of projects as having 5 components: the data, which is the source information, as well as the kind of analysis generated by the researchers; the products, which could be the website or print materials; the code that's written to generate the analysis or generate the website; documentation about rights and intellectual property, as well as about data models and metadata schemas; and release management, so releasing different versions, in this case, of code. And next slide. I won't go through all of these, but these are kind of examples of the recommendations and the principles that they recommend. They say data should only be stored in formats which conform to open standards. No boutique or fashionable technologies. I'll talk about that in a minute as well. All links are working and no broken links, no server-side scripting, no backend database. So they're very kind of particular and strict. And again, this is not necessarily for an ongoing project, an active project, but it is intended for when a project has ended its kind of active life and is intended to be archived. These are some guidelines for that. Next slide. Okay. So now I'll just talk a little bit about one major decision point that most digital projects face, and that is choosing a digital publishing platform. So I've taken the points on this slide from another website at the University of California at Berkeley, which has some good guidance on these issues. The platform you choose is going to make a big difference in the sustainability of the project. Factors to consider include what the functionality of the platform, how familiar you or your staff are, the community around it that uses that platform, what kind of support you can get for it, and the cost. So questions to ask here include things like how often will the software need to be updated, and who's going to do that? How often will new content be added? What kind of technical skills will be needed? Where will the project be hosted? At your institution, or do you need to go look elsewhere for hosting and support? For how long will you need that? How much server space is needed, and what will it cost? And also, like, what can data be exported from the platform you use, and in what format? Next slide, please. So this brings me to one kind of issue that comes about, and that's worth considering when thinking about a platform. And Sylvia alluded to this in her previous in the previous presentation when she talked about minimal computing and the platform WAX, and that is the issue of dynamic websites versus static websites. So very briefly, most of the websites that we see today on the web are probably dynamic websites. So platforms like WordPress, Drupal, Omeka, popular DH platforms, are dynamic sites in that there's actually no site there. The data is stored in a database, and the content management system sends a query to the database and brings back the data and creates a web page for the user whenever they visit the site. So in order for those to work, the content management system and the database need to be kept running continuously, and they need to be able to talk to each other. And they're continually being updated, and they need to run on a web server. So there's a big stack of technology that needs to be continually up to date and operational for those websites to work. Static websites work a little differently. So the site is built on your local computer, and there's no interactivity in the same way. The content is there, and you just upload the files to the web server, and users access those files directly. So it uses technologies like plain text, markdown, and software like site generators such as Jekyll. There's no database to maintain, and once the site is made, you just need to maintain those static files. So it's a lot easier in the long run. It's also a lot faster, and it's more secure, and it's more flexible, because if it's a static website, you can put it onto a flash drive and exchange it with colleagues. It takes less bandwidth. It's not hackable in the same way. There are limitations too for static sites, especially when you're talking about a lot of interactivity or multiple users. But it's a very powerful tool for preservation purposes. And the Endings project, a lot of those principles that I just mentioned, they're all about converting your dynamic site to a static website. Let's see. Okay, so so in the chat, I placed the slides as well as a bibliography of a link to all the sites I mentioned, as well as a few others. There's a lot of resources on sustainability. A few of the kind of key takeaways that I think from the ones I mentioned and others are these here. So one, consider maintenance and preservation early in the project planning process. The earlier you think about it, the easier it's going to be to move to those sustainability strategies. Documentation is really important, and it also takes time to do. So planning and budgeting in time to just spend writing documentation as you go is very important. Keeping it simple is better in most cases, especially for those projects that are working outside of institutional structures, an individual scholar or those without many resources. Static, less functionality is going to be just easier to maintain down the road. Sustainability is both a social and a technical matter. It involves the technical side, of course, is the hardware, software, and the data. The social side is the staff, as well as the audience and anticipated and unanticipated users of your site. And finally, sustainability is an iterative and ongoing process. So digital projects are not like a book that you can put on the shelf and it will be there for decades and decades. It's an active, ongoing process. Even a static site that is not being changed does require an active server and infrastructure to support it, even if it's minimal. And that's where I will end it. But I am happy now to have some discussion. If James and Sylvia want to rejoin, that would be fine too. It would be great to kind of tie this back to some of the themes that they brought up. Thank you.
Thank you so much. A round of applause, please. Thank you so much, Brian, for the wonderful presentation. This is more or less, should I say, you have listened to the aspect. It's an aspect that is very important. Even though some of us are just coming to learn the rudiment of DH practices, but project maintenance, implementation, sustenance, they are all very, very important aspects. And so if you have a question, then we are going to engage them, ask questions. If you travel back to your countries, definitely you can link people and discuss with them one-on-one. But here we have a collective responsibility. Question, another person might necessarily benefit from your own question. Please, if you have a question, let me see your hand. One. I don't want afterthought of questions. Yes? Okay. Two. Three. Yes. Are there questions, James? Okay. Room 307. If you have questions there, please kindly write out those questions. Opportunities as well could be given to you to ask. Yes, we're going to, Brian, would you like to take the questions as a whole, or should I give them individually? Or maybe one after the other, you tackle the questions.
Yeah, that's fine. Either way is okay with me.
Okay. Okay. So you, yes, the first question. Okay.
Thank you, Brian, for that very instructive presentation. My name is Bumi Okonoda from the National Institute for Policy and Strategic Studies, School, Jos. Okay, while you were talking about digital fragility, you talked about the need to have a backup. That we shouldn't use Dropbox for long term. So I would like to know what other tools can we use for backup, for long term, and also for short term. What other tools? Because Dropbox was the only tool. What other methods can we use? Thank you.
Brian, did you get a question?
Yes, I did. Thank you. Yes, thank you for that question. That's a great question. And as I mentioned in the beginning, I can't really offer specific tools because every project is a little bit different. But I can say that Dropbox is very useful for many things, and in the short term, it's good. Dropbox is more designed for sharing files, so it works great for project teams, and it serves fine as a kind of short-term backup place. The downsides of Dropbox are that it's a private company, so we don't know what they presumably will be in business for a while, but you never know. And also when you're working with private companies like that, you sign agreements. So they say that they respect your privacy, etc. But they do control and you're storing your material on their servers. They're vulnerable. They're open to being hacked. So partly that depends on the level of security that you need for the project that you're with. So a lot of backup solutions are local solutions, regularly backing up to a local hard drive. But there are also cloud solutions that also have the advantage of having copies in different geographical locations. So if there is a fire or some physical destruction in one place, there's still a backup. A lot of this will depend on the type of material you have and the kind of urgency of it. And I would recommend actually going to the roadmap that I mentioned, and I think it's module C1 actually walks you through the kind of questions you need to ask and recommend specific approaches and specific tools. So module C1 of the socio-technical sustainability roadmap. I would also just add that, you know, Dropbox is, it may work fine for your particular project. It you know, again, it depends on the amount of material and the length of time you need that.
Okay.
I'm sorry, it's module C2.
I'm sorry, it's module C2. Yes, Brian, it appears we lost the connection, so we didn't really get a grasp of what you said. So that is part of the challenges in practicing DH in Africa. I guess the network, we were cut short. I don't, either Jem, Yeku, if you heard Brian help to put a question straight. I think you were asking that, talked about some of the ways that it is not necessarily good to put archive or store our data in Dropbox or emails, and then she is asking what are other methods, what are the viable methods that we can use necessarily to do that.
Okay, yeah.
Long term, and considering also the capacity of funds.
Right. Yes. So I mean, some of the other methods. Oh, I'm hearing a lot of echo here. Some of the other methods would be local hard drive, backing things up locally, where you retain control of the data. There are also other cloud-based backup services that are more for backup, and that also have the advantage of having the data in a different location in case there is a fire or something. Dropbox may be suitable for your needs. I'm not saying that it isn't, but it's generally more of a tool for communication and sharing of files rather than backing up and securing files. And so my recommendation would be to go to the sustainability roadmap. I pasted the link here. Module B2 actually discusses this very issue. Thinking about backing up your work, and it asks you a series of questions about how much, what is the security level, what resources do you have available, and then it offers several very specific paths forward for backing up your data. Like if it's the most high secure national level data, it recommends backing it up in 3 separate geographic locations. Most of our projects don't need that. but they need some sort of some sort of backup, and that could be on a hard drive. It could be on a cloud service that's more devoted to backup, things like that. So yeah, so I would suggest going to the reading through that module of the roadmap, and working through the questions asked with your project in mind.
We need
I'm
to.
not sure. Okay.
Our last, I think that's the last speaker for today. Yes. Please, let's have just 2 questions before we. Yes. No, they are already there, but we are trying to make the network better. Yes. Okay.
Thank you very much for your brand presentation. I go by the name of Habib Sen. I come from Cheikh Anta Diop University, Senegal. My question is, what can be done for people like me who are being initiated for the first time in DH to build a kind of sustainable collaboration between us and people like you so that we can really better our knowledge and better our strength in the domain? Thank you.
Brian, I don't know. Did you get him?
Yes, I did.
Yes, I did. Okay.
Yes, I did. Thank you. That's a wonderful question.
That's a wonderful question.
Thank you for asking.
Thank you for asking.
I think to start with, we here at Kansas, as well as other institutions around North America, are very interested in collaborating. We are also active in a group called Global Outlook Digital Humanities, which is an email listserv that you can subscribe to and take part in conversations and work with and kind of be aware of what else is going on. In terms of collaboration with us, I think the best thing is just to start conversations. See what share what kind of projects you're interested in, and we can go from there. I think the best collaborations typically tend to be ones that arise from real projects where there's a need on the ground and a kind of shared kind of opportunity, rather than kind of forcing a collaboration. So I would just say let's talk and see what kind of work we're all doing and where there might be a chance for collaboration. And so I encourage you and anyone else to get in touch with Sylvia or James or me and just start the conversation there.
I would like to add about the African DH also, that it's being organized by James Jeku, which is in collaboration with IDRE, but also pushing towards this collaboration with institutions in Africa. I'm just going to add the link there.
Thank you, Sylvia.
Okay. the okay, maybe we take the last question. We'll definitely get to this thing, and then maybe on. Okay, Prof. We can end it. Okay, Brian, Yeku and Sylvia, I think we are having some challenges in connectivity. Okay, we are going to put down all the questions and then send it to you people. I think, Yeku, you still have some people who are interested in asking you questions, including Sylvia. So we are going to do that since I think the connection is so poor. We are not really getting you quite clearly. So it is very, no, it is okay in YouTube, but we are not using YouTube. And so you can get it actually in YouTube. So you write down, make sure your questions are there. I'm going to collate them and send to them, and that will be okay. Thank you so much for being with us. Please. The students are just being very, very appreciative of all your efforts being with us. I'm sure that, James, you talked about archiving of memories. I'm sure that this memory will not depart from them in a short while. It's going to last long also. So a round of applause again, please.
I want to thank you on behalf of our team in Lagos. I want to thank you, Brian, James, and Sylvia. Thank you so much for taking time off to share your thoughts with us. I overheard somebody asking questions about collaboration, and I think I need to let them know that Kansas University actually has been a very great partner to us at the Center for Digital Humanity at the University of Lagos here. So they are partners, and we are working together, and we hope that we continue to develop projects and engagement that would help us here to be able to expand our reach in terms of digital humanity project and training. So I want to thank all of you. We appreciate your contribution to the success of this summer school. We wish you all the best. So hopefully we'll see.
I don't know if you can hear me, but thank you very much, everyone. Please do send questions, get in touch, and I wish you all have a great conference the rest of this week, and look forward to being in touch with you some more.
Do we leave studio?
But the question about social sustainability was really good, Brian.
Which one? I'm sorry.
The social dimensions of sustainability. I like that approach.
Oh, good.
That's not something you hear a lot. Sustainability, but the social dimensions in terms of let's work together and sustain this together.
Right. Yeah. Digital projects not sustainable without an audience either. Yes, which is, I think one that's not reflected in that ending. Although that's more talking about archiving in general.
I'm thinking it's probably. I think we could leave the studio. They seem to have. Okay, let's talk tomorrow is at 10, right?
Mhm.
I think so. You guys did great. I loved your.
Yeah, I thought CBS part really helps to bring things together.
Yeah, yeah, really nice. I learned so much. All right. Well, I think Barbara's here too somewhere, but I don't see her. So I don't know. I guess we can go. So, okay. Thanks. Let's be in touch soon. And yeah. All right.
It is possible for you to put your concept in a project from what you have learned from yesterday to today. Write out, take a piece of paper, write out a project you can articulate from what you have learned from yesterday and today. Write out a project in your area of discipline. You will pass it to me. We're going to evaluate it and see. Yes? Please, go ahead. It's a compulsory work. Yeah, no, it's not. We are submitting now, no. Write out a very simple. You followed the lecture from yesterday. Okay. Immediately she comes, the project is still, the assignment is pending. The assignment, I'm going to collect it. Okay.
Hello. I think that it says here that everybody can see me and hear me.
Yes, Barbara, we are glad you are there, but though not in person. I had expected you to be in Lagos.
Yeah, I wish I could be there in person. It's not easy to travel these days.
Tunde to do the introduction for, and so that the participant will go to. I'm going to make a short presentation on GoDH.
Okay.
GoDH, Global Outlook. And the person you are seeing in this presentation is actually the chair of GoDH worldwide. And so after that, some of us are going to be integrated into the GoDH network. I actually promised her that I was going to do that, and I'm using this opportunity to inform you in advance. So I will allow our chair to do the presentation. Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you very much, Richard. Barbara, good to see you. I said, well, I'd love to have you in Lagos, but I think we are happy that we can see you, and then you can connect with us. I won't want to waste much time on introducing Barbara because she's an expert in DH, and she's been working on textual communities, and online environment, trying to push the boundary of DH, especially with respect to how to apply tools in digital humanity to textual analysis, and then how that can can benefit communities locally and internationally. As Richard mentioned, Barbara is the chair of GoodDH. I had finished my own term on GoodDH as a board, as an executive member on the board, and Richard is there now. James, James is also there now. So we are hoping that when Richard actually introduces GoodDH to you, GoodDH is the short form for Global Outlook for Digital Humanities, and it's an association actually very interested in supporting underrepresented community in DH all over the world. And then since I joined, I mean they've been supporting us, and then trying to open the door for global connection and contact. And we want to thank you so much for your service to GoDH, and we are hoping that as we listen to you, our colleagues and the participants here will be able to learn more about how they can actually benefit from digital humanities and by applying the tools to their various areas of expertise and research. Thank you very much, Barbara. You are welcome. So I will yield the floor to you now. I will allow you to just give us your talk. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, and for the opportunity of being here today, even though this is virtual. I'll try to share my screen. I saw how Brian had a little bit of trouble, so I'm a little bit scared, but maybe I shouldn't be. Yes, it is working, I think. Perfect. So, of course, I cannot see if you're seeing this, so I'm hoping you are. And I am hoping you can see me. So if anyone can say something to let me know that this is projecting correctly, that would be great. No? I'm a bit concerned. This is. Is it working? Is it working?
No, it's not working.
It's not?
Not yet.
It says here, share your screen.
Yes, then you pick your application.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe your PowerPoint from the drop-down box that opens up in the upper part.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
Like there?
Like there? Yeah.
Good. Start again then. Okay, so if now you can see it, this is wonderful. Fantastic. I can see it all now. Okay, so today I'm going to talk a little bit about the history of what is now digital humanities, and also the system that we have created that is called textual communities. And the idea behind textual communities, as you will see, was to produce an environment that would allow anyone to do digital editions. I was very worried when Brian was talking about so many digital editions that have disappeared and are no longer available. So that really concerned me quite a bit. And, it was something that I really didn't want to to hear very much about. So, okay, so this is actually going to be our Hengrid Chaucer, our digital facsimile that has existed now for 20 years, and it is still available, so that's a good thing. And what I want to show you is I'm going to take a few risks today. So I have slides for this presentation, but I also have some live websites that I could show you, that I will try to show you, so you see how it actually works. So these are just flat. And what we do is we present, of course, as very many editions do. We present images and text and other things that are of interest to us, like collations. And for example, this is it shows a map of the inks in the manuscript and the running heads and such things. This is an image that shows the conjugate of the page. So we have like virtually taken apart the manuscript and showing you what would have been at the time a single animal. This manuscript is in parchment, so this actually was a big cow. Once was alive, and now it's just 2 folios of our manuscript. So this is the other side of it. You can see that stain, how it moves from one side of it, penetrated the parchment. So I'm going to risk it now, and I'm going to show you some things live, so you can see how it works. It's not working because of course it's not selected. Aha. I should have selected that. Okay, so if I had done this properly, I would have known that I couldn't show you the links without having to select the actual pages. But I'm going to skip this for now because I don't think it is that important. As I said, I have the flats for that. So this is one of the type of editions that we do. Is a single text and a single it's a manuscript, complete manuscript. But the other type of edition that we do is actually the one that has multiple texts of a single, many versions of a single text. And so it has many manuscripts. And this, they look a little bit different. This is the Non's Priest Tale, for example. And you can see these are very nice digital images. You can see the gold leaf, the illumination, the details are very nice. And we have notes explaining what this means and all that. But more importantly, what we have is we have a collation of the text. We present all the textual variations. So I'm going to keep going here, and I will show you. There is this particular page, for example, where you can see a line I have highlighted and in red. It reads, "Besits a grove standing in a dale." And the word standing is the word that interests me. I am personally interested in the transmission of text, how texts get copied and how people make mistakes when they are copying them or change things on purpose. And then they do this. So that is one line in a particular manuscript. But what happens with the other 52 manuscripts of this text? And what they have is 2 different readings. One is stonding, like in the manuscript we were looking at before, and the other one is dwelling. That's a group of 3 witnesses particularly. Now, how did we come to this information? In order to get here to this very nice, very neat variant and very separated groups of manuscripts, what we had to do was to do the transcriptions and then to compare them using software, specialized software for this, and then follow a series of processes. That's how we used to do it in the old days. And it was quite cumbersome, a quite cumbersome thing to do. Then after that, we will convert that using that information using some software. So here you can see that variant, standing and dwelling, and then that will be coded in this particular way. And we use that coding to build phylogenetic trees. We use evolutionary biology software to reconstruct the relationships between the manuscripts. Normally that software uses DNA, but we use this type of code, letters and words, and then we can tell the relationships between the different witnesses. And then we get something like this, which is quite a neat map. We call it a variant map with the distribution of those variants. So if you look at the variants in red, that's the standing is most common. And then we have the other one, dwelling, separate. Now, this all is a lot of work, as you can imagine. And this is what it took to make these editions. We had to use various pieces of highly specialized software. And some of that software is very challenging, or was very challenging to learn and to understand. For example, to use evolutionary biology software, I had to read some books on molecular evolution. And I have written a bit about that, but it's not the kind of thing that you normally do when you study literature. You don't read molecular evolution. This is out of our normal scope. Then after using all these different pieces of software, we had to convert the files, which have to be managed and within systems of storage. We need to know where the right things are, and then, put those together for editions. We have years of close collaboration with editors, with other editors, and it requires a lot of time, many years of work, and then many negotiations at every level. So in the editions that I am the editor of, like the ones of the Canterbury Tales, it's all fine. Things are working okay. But when I have to work with someone else, when I cooperate with others, for example, we did it for the Divine Comedy, or for medieval Spanish cancioneros, or for the Historia de España, is my most recent collaboration. Then you have to also negotiate with the other editors. What is it that they want to do? How do they want to do it? How do they want to display it? All of those things you have to take into account. So one of the things that we discovered was that this was really very difficult for people to do. So they would have to come to us and say, well, how do we do this? And we'll show them the software and we will try to train people. And that became really complicated. It also was not very easy for us to do it. So to give you an idea, we use for doing our transcriptions, BBEdit and Text Wrangler. We compare texts using Collate 2. Then Collate 2 converted those texts into XML because we didn't originally transcribe in XML. We generated that Nexus file that I show you, that is all the complicated one with the minus zeros and ones and question marks. And then we use phylogenetic software. This is the one that we use. We use phylogenetic analysis using parsimony and other methods. That is called PAUP. And that analyzes those files and produces the trees. Then we have a variant database where we can apply very complicated queries. We can say, show me variants in this group of manuscripts, not present in these 3 manuscripts, but that appear also in these 2 manuscripts. And all of that is also complicated to master, but we have that to analyze how the variants are being processed by the software. That is, we need to understand why we get the results that we get. And then we use those 2 editions that I just showed you were actually published using Anastasia publishing system. We later changed the software and started using SD Publisher. And those convert XML into HTML dynamically, so we can show them online. And if I could select all the different pages that I had to show, then you could see that too. But maybe I'll do that at the end, depending how things go. Anyway, so I'll show you the online variorum of the origin of a species because I'm really proud of this edition, and also because it gives you an idea of things that are non-medieval that we have done. And this is really that's a non-dynamic edition. That's a static edition. So everything has been converted into HTML for this, and the website doesn't depend on me. So it's kind of difficult for me to manage. And this is how it looks. Again, you have the transcription and you have the images. And what I really like is that it shows the variants in the different print editions of the Origin of a Species. And because I never ever lose opportunity of showing this, I'll show you my favorite variant in the Origin of a Species. That is the second sentence in the historical sketch. And I'll show you why it's my favorite, because it used to say, the great majority of naturalists believe that species are immutable productions that have been separately created. And then it was changed eventually in 1869 to, until recently, the great majority of naturalists believed that species were immutable productions and had been separately created. And I really like that, because I think very few people get to live to see that their work has changed the world. And Darwin seems to have done exactly this. And I always think that that's the best piece of variation that I have seen in the whole of the Origin. So these are pieces of software that we have used for the creation of our editions, and I call them Canterbury Tales project related software. So I will give great credit then to my colleague, P. Robinson, who actually created Collate and Collate 2 that we use for many, many years. He developed the Anastasia publishing system and as the publisher, and he's actually the great mind behind Textual Communities. So I just am a little collaborator on this. Really, he's the person who has put it together. So Textual Communities comes then from a long lineage of collation software, publishing software, and other tools that were being used separately and were so difficult to use that didn't allow us to help as many people as we wanted to say, hey, this is how you do it if you want to do an edition. But now we can actually do precisely that. We get to show Textual Communities to people, and maybe someone can decide that yes, this is something they can do themselves. So I'll just show you a couple of images. This is our latest edition that we're working on. It's called the Tale of the Cook and the Reeve and the Cook, and it looks a little bit different. The design is different, but actually all the data is dynamically being pulled from Textual Communities. And if you notice, for example, I don't know how well you can see this because the text maybe is too small, but it says diplomatic on the top of that page. And that is because we have in Textual Communities like a view that doesn't show the abbreviations of the text. There are loads of abbreviations in medieval manuscripts. And we have another view that actually shows the expanded text. So again, I was going to show you some samples of this, but I'm going to skip that for now. So I'll show you Textual Communities a little bit. So Textual Communities, when you first go there, this is what you will see if you look at the main site. We have at the moment two sites. The main site that is this address, textualcommunities.org. And that is for projects that are, going to be stable and like that. For testing, we have a sandbox. So if you just wanted to text Textual Communities, the address is in this presentation that I will upload later, and I can give you also the link to it. But then I would suggest that you use the sandbox. But part of what I wanted to do today was to show how the sandbox works and the things that you can do with it and how it integrates with other things. But we'll see how we're doing with time and whether I can shift my screen so you can see it. So we initially called Textual Communities something like we used to describe it as the Facebook for text and manuscripts. And the idea was that it should be as easy as opening a social media account to come to Textual Communities, open it, put together what you needed, and create your own edition. And Textual Communities, what it does is integrates all of the processes. We don't have to use separate software to transcribe. We don't have to use parsers that are somewhere else. So we have a transcription tool, we have an image viewer, we have we have collation tools. There is a collation integration. So we have integrated both CollateX and the collation viewer that Catherine Smith made. So it's really quite sophisticated, and everything can be there inside. One of the things that we are still missing here, because we continue developing Textual Communities, is that we haven't yet integrated estematological software. We cannot put in the phylogenetic software because, well, it is complicated to use. We couldn't explain it to people, and because it's proprietary. But we have colleagues in Finland who have been working on estematological text, what would I say it? software that hypothesizes relationships between texts and is designed for mostly for historical and literary texts. So that actually we want to integrate into textual communities. So it will be a tool that does everything. And in HOST, there is a database in it. And with the application programmer's interface, you can pull the data out and build your edition, which is what we did with the Tale of the Reeve and the Tales of the Reeve and the Cook. So it's quite sturdy, it's robust, well tested. We have about 200 people who have been working with it. And it works very well, I would say, fairly well. It doesn't do everything as I would like it to do, but that's because I don't get Peter to to do everything I say, even though we cooperate on things. So this is how the interface looks when you are producing your transcription. So you get your images and you get your text and you just directly go on transcribe, and you can zoom in and zoom out from those. Again, these are all the manuscripts of the Canterbury Tales that we have loaded there. One of the issues we still have is, of course, negotiation with libraries to publish these things, because now that I'm the director of the Canterbury Tales project, one of the things that we want to do is make sure that we offer open access versions of everything. And some of the libraries, despite the fact that they have this very same manuscript in open access, they actually don't like the idea of us having it in our website. So we have to negotiate all this and convince them that it's no big deal, and it's not a difference to them. It shouldn't divert any traffic from their sites or anything. And we have recently negotiated successfully with the British Library, as well as with other important libraries in the UK. We are still waiting to hear from some of them, but although it takes a long time, eventually people say yes, and we can do the work that we want to do. So this is a view of what we call the diplomatic transcription in textual communities. That's I was saying, well, not everything works as I would like it to. I would like to say this is not a diplomatic transcription. I am a philologist, so I'm really picky about language and things. And I want to say this is a transcription that shows abbreviations. It's not really completely diplomatic, but that is because I'm really iffy about terms and things and have that little quirk. Anyway, so it's really that. It shows all the abbreviations that we can record in our transcription. And that's something that we want to do. But then we have, I didn't take a picture of that. We in that little square, I can click and it will say show the edited text, it says. And again, it's not the edited text, it's the expanded abbreviation. So I have both transcriptions within a single file. And that to me is a great thing, even though the names do not reflect what I think that these views are. Anyway, so this is a view of our integration of the collation tools, the viewer and the collation software. So this, what I'm showing you, is already a regularized version. I mean, I don't know, again, how close you are to the screen or if this is big enough. But what it does is we go through it and we remove variant spellings that are not interesting for us. So we just, for example, the word one in Middle English could be spelled with an E or could be spelled with double N-E, and all of that means the same. So we want to say, when you are building a stemma, do not take the spelling variation into account. So we tell the software that. Again, don't worry too much. If you cannot see this very well, I will post all this online and then you can see it. You can look at it better and take your time. So this is how it looks when it has been regularized. It only shows what we call stemmatically significant variation. So there are no variants in the first two words when that, but the third word that in many editions will read April also has a variant that is Avril, and of course it means the same, but the spelling is so particular that we think it is important. So we have kept this variation for our editions. Then we do something called a variance setting, where we decide which variants should be together with others for better reading of the final edition. So you see, we are very focused on how readers will be able to see this, to to understand it. And again, I have some samples here that I want to go with, and it's probably not going to work. But I actually do want to try this. I want to see if I can, okay, how do I change my streaming to the order? So maybe if I stop it and I restart it, then I can do that, and I can show you my texture communities. So share screen, and share this one. And now, not like that. I did it a minute ago. So it was share window, share tab. There it is. So I want this one, I think. Yes, perfect. Okay, so you can see that I'm logged in. So it says my name there and all that. And I was, doing some tests to try. I am going to do it again, so you can see me doing this live, which is something I think is very cool. So I'm going to call this Leyes de Moros. And I'm going to say Leyes de Moros test. And that's going to be fine. I could put a description and all sorts of things. And here is one thing. You can say everyone can join. And it says everyone can see it. Anyone can ask to join. Anyone asking will join. And then I could say everyone joining will lead. Everyone joining transcribes everything. So I have a lot of different possibilities of how to control or not, or open my community. So why is it not doing it? Because it's telling me I have too many cursors. Okay, let's do it. So, okay. No, you still have too many characters. Okay. And I still have too many characters? Okay. It doesn't want me to use the same name that I used before when I was doing this. Okay. So it has created it, and there is nothing there, right? So one of the things that one does is one goes and, just opens this thing, adds a document, and you can do page by page. You can upload a single page by single page if you want. You can have an XML file, but you can do something that I think is truly magical. That is to use a manifest. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually click on this. It's there is a manuscript that I found in the Leiden collection, and they have a AAAF manifest. So what I do is I copy that from the manuscript, and I said AAAF manifest, and I put the address here. And the name of this is Leiden something. It doesn't matter. Just let's give it a number. But it does have a proper sigil, of course. And I will say, oh, yes. So it's doing it. And what it has done is it has created this manuscript. Let me reload it. And now I have the thing that I have made up, and suddenly I click and I have the images there that probably most of you cannot read, but I pick a manuscript that was easy for me. So it starts saying Leyes de Moros, and it goes It's in Spanish, of course. Entre los que se guardan en la biblioteca. So those who are safe in the library, blah, blah, blah. Now, this is one that I did before, in which I had started to transcribe the text. So I went to this particular page, and I hope you're still seeing it. Yes. And this was the initial thing that I had. So I didn't have text, I didn't have anything. So I started to transcribe it, and it was just a little bit. This is a XML file, and you have here, this is what it would appear with the divs and the body of the text. And what I did is I created a little bit of a transcription where it says there is a paragraph. It says Leyes de Moro. It's really a title. And then it starts among the manuscripts, blah, blah, blah. And I put it there. But when you preview this, and again, I'm doing all this live, you cannot see the text because there are no line breaks. So what I did for it was I put the line breaks in a different version of it. So this one has the line breaks at the end of each of the line breaks corresponding. And if you preview this, then suddenly you have the line breaks as they appear in the manuscript. So textual communities is quite powerful. I will show you here the real textual communities. That is something that I wanted to do. Textual communities. There it is. So the other was the sandbox, and this one instead is the real thing. And this is the real Canterbury Tales project site. So if I go and change things here, they will change in real life for our project. And it's kind of fun, very exciting. So we can take any manuscript. We have been working on this particular manuscript. And again, you can see the text and the transcription here. You can change that. But I want to show you a little bit how we manage this. So if I look at the community, and for example, I wanted to assign one of the members of my project, let's say Khalid, I could assign him pages. So I can go to this and I can see exactly who has transcribed each of the pages of that particular witness. And you can see each of them has a transcriber and a supervisor and like that. So I can assign these pages now in real time to someone to transcribe. But more than that, one of the wonderful things about the Canterbury Tales is that the collation view that I was showing you before. And I don't know why it's doing this. Just start again. Okay. So there it comes again. And then in the collation, what I was showing you before was that you can open this system that will compare all the different manuscripts, and it will show me all the variation. So this is the same one I showed you before, but now it's live. You can see that I look at each of the variants, and it tells me where it is, which witnesses have it very quickly there. And that, of course, doesn't mean much for most people, but I understand that immediately. And if I want, I can show the regularizations. That is what I showed you before. So you can see all the things that we have decided that had no particular significance for the work that we want to do. And so we hide that. Then we can move these to variance settings and other things like that. So it's quite something. I don't know how am I doing with time. I think I still have plenty of time. So someone shout at me if I don't. So I want to show you then the edition that I didn't show you before, the one of the cook and the rib, because you will be able to see some of the remnants then of textual communities in there. So again, this is now live, and I can, you see here where it says diplomatic and edited, as I was telling you, that the text changes. You probably cannot see it very well, but that comes directly. I was dragging it from textual communities, and we haven't yet decided the nomenclature for the edition. So for now, this is a prototype for it, even though the text is complete and all that. One of the things that you can do then is look at the collations here. And here is something that is quite wonderful, I think, about what we have done with this. Much more interactive than our other editions. So for example, this is the first line. And here you can see that when I move the mouse over each of the variants, then suddenly everything changes colors. It is showing me the distribution of every single variant in that tree, in that variant map that was produced by the phylogenetic software. And so all of this is happening, coming directly from the database, from textual communities. Now, the very last thing that I want to show you then is also from English editions, and this is something that is quite nice, I think, and is our edition, our Cant app edition. This is the online version, but I encourage you to go to Google Play and to, let me see, I'm not showing it properly. To go to Google Play and to the Apple Store. You can download this edition for free in either of those. And this, just the general plug, is designed specifically for mobile devices. So it should work well in your phone or in a tablet. I'm showing it in the computer. That is not ideal, but you can download it for your phone. And if I click on the edition, it should. I don't know if it's going to share my sound, but maybe we will. So
Ere beginneth the book of the Talus of Canterbury. One that Avril, with his sure sorter, the drocht of March hath pierced to the rota, and bathed every vine in sweet liquor, of which thereto engendered is the flour. One Zephyrus with his sweet breath in
I can change the views, and I can have this. This is my edition of the text. You can actually roll your mouse through it, and it will show you the manuscript and the translation. You can have the translation too. We have notes that you can turn on and glosses for people who don't know Middle English. So all of this is, again, we worked at Intextual Communities, and the app. This app is actually not dynamic. That's why you can download it and take it in your phone. And if you find a mistake, you have to let us know, and then we'll fix it. But it will take a while because we can do that dynamically. I was going to also invite you to our. I finally mastered how to do this, I think. Yes, I just used the same window for everything. So I wanted to invite you at the end of this presentation to maybe come to our workshop on textual communities, which is, here are the instructions to download the app if you're interested. So go to Google Play or the Apple Store. And here is our workshop that we are doing. It's called Making an Edition of a Text in Many Versions. We'll be doing this at the Summers University in Digital Humanities, and this will be happening in August. The deadline for this is 15th of March, and there are some grants that they are given for this. Of course, my hope is that if there are many people here interested in doing editions, maybe next year we can do practical workshop, and we can show you exactly how to put your own text and your own images that you want to work on online, and make the edition that you wish you could make, or something like that. I don't know. So it will depend on you. If you are interested, then you can tell today that please tell Barbara to come over and show us this. But it really would depend on what is it that you like to do. So I think that that's more or less what I have to say for today. I don't know if you have any questions, or if there is anything else I can help you with. Please let us know.
Thank you so much, Barbara, for such a wonderful presentation. I know you should. I told you when you talk about a community, especially the non-reached, the unreached communities in DH, we found here there are people from Senegal, there are people from Mali, there are people from Ghana, there are people also from Cameroon, there are people from Ivory Coast, we have Nigerians, there are people from Togo, and so we have different. That is why I told them that the DH community is more or less a globalizing community, and you have heard from him. If you have questions to ask as regards that, please, we'll make it as brief as possible. He has talked about building a textile community. It is definitely what will be an end result of every project you want to do, because there must be the relationship between the town and the gang. So it is very pivotal for the survivor. You heard Brian talk about the survivor of DH projects, and so it is very, very important. Let me see how many people are interested in asking questions. Yes? One? Okay. I'm sure that this one is one. This one is one, and you shouldn't tell me that as a bird was flying and then dropped another question on your head. Please, if you want to ask question, we don't really have much time now. Please, okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Barbara, for the wonderful presentation. I'm David Kuse, University of Bamenda and ENS Yaoundé. Thank you very much, because you have dwelled in an area that I really have a passion for. We are here in some capacities as researchers, teachers, and supervisors. Now, you have talked about digital humanities and textual communities. Now, you did show a slide of film content, and I would really like to know, how do we mine film content? Because as a supervisor, I would like to initiate my students into that domain, especially as regards their dissertations or research works. That is my question. Thank you very much.
Barbara, I'm sure you got a question.
Yeah, I did. I got a question. So it's about mining film content. Anyway, so actually, this was not. It's a pre-made Java script, so it's not really a film. It's a Java application. It's all HTML and Java. That's how we did it. So it's not really quite a film. It's just a website that has that feature. We have animated it, so it looks like a film. It's the same thing if you put it in your mobile phone. I'm not sure what type of film would you like to mine, but I always find that any mine content tends to be difficult to handle because of copyright reasons. So I have had students, particularly since you talk about being a supervisor, that wanted to work with publicly available things. And what we discover is if any data of that type has been published in social media and is open, generally you can use it for research purposes. We did this, for example, to actually create some animated version reconstruction of a castle that was demolished some years ago. And what my student did is she actually harvested images from Flickr. But I'm sure that the same thing applies to film. So in a website like Flickr, if you can have access to it, it's considered to be publicly available. So people cannot say you cannot use it. It's a courtesy, however, to let know anyone who has produced or uploaded this materials that you are using it for research. So just as a courtesy, I will reach out and I will say, yes, we are doing this, but it's not really the same copyright doesn't apply. And of course, copyright, I am not an expert, I should say, I'm not an expert, but it varies so much from country to country that it will depend on where you are and what kind of materials you are handling, whether you can use it or not. I hope that answers the question. I don't know if there are any other questions or comments or, observations. So I'm not hearing anything else.
Okay. Okay. Yes. I was saying that a lot of them are actually interested in your workshop, and if you wouldn't mind, maybe you share the link to us. They will be able to find more details in your that is in the website.
Yeah,
is it
no
okay
problem.
by you?
Yeah, of course. I can put the link. I can put the link. Let me see.
Yes, because it was part of your PowerPoint, so it didn't actually stay long for them to copy it, maybe either to snap it or whatever means. But if you drop it, we have a
I
WhatsApp
just
group.
put it in the
It's
chat.
possible for them to share. Okay. It is in the it's in the chat.
Yeah.
Check it out.
But of course, Richard, I was asking for you to invite you to come to Nigeria next year.
I understand. We have the new normal, and we are trying actually to know how to live by it. I'm sure that the students, maybe by next summer school, you should be able to see her live in Lagos.
Wouldn't that be wonderful?
Barbara, are you still there?
Yes, I am here.
Okay. I'm sure that the students, they did find the presentation engaging, and you definitely will see them more in activities in GoDH. As I'm going to use these few minutes to talk about GoDH to them, I'm sure that most of them will be interested in our activities in GoDH.
Absolutely.
So from there, if they have further conversations with you, it can be initiated. Yeku, Brian, all of them are part of GoDH. And so if you have further questions, it is possible to engage them. A round of applause actually for Barbara. On behalf of the organizing committee of the third edition of the Lagos Summer School in Digital Humanities, Matunde said I should extend his warm gratitude to you for making up your time and being with us here, though visually, but we are promising them, we are promising them that next time there will be no COVID, and then you should be with us here in Lagos. I had expected to see you. Thank you so much. Please, a round of applause before. Thank you so much, and bye-bye.
Thank
Bye.
you to all of you. It's my honor to be here today. I guess have a
Thank you
good
so
evening
much.
tonight. And if there are any other questions, just reach out to me right now.
Yes, any other question, we're going to write it down. We'll definitely send it to you. And then if we can initiate further interactions from there. Thank you so much. And
Thank you
bye.
so much.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Okay, yeah. Bye. Please. Okay, I had a promise before we go for our evening rest. I said I was going to use the time to talk about GoDH. GoDH is a Global Outlook Digital Humanities. Go. You have column 2, then DH. Go, column 2, then DH. That's go. Global Outlook, DH, Digital Humanities. Okay. It's going to write it for you. You can as well Google it. You definitely you'll find. Like during her introduction, when she was being introduced to us, Professor Tunde made mention of GoDH. GoDH actually is, no, he's going to do that, don't worry. It's just, he's doing that, he's going to show us. GoDH has 5 objectives. Number 1, discovery. That means that GoDH intends to discover you in your limitations and shortcomings in DH. And then they will be able to build upon your weaknesses and to make you strong. And so that is number 1, discovery. Number 2 is community building. Community building, because DH projects, they run in synergies, collaborations. That is the composite net I discussed earlier. And so it is very important to build a community. And this community does not have tribal sentiment. It cuts across a different, it can be trans-cultural, it can be transnational, it can be trans-ethnic. So it can move backwards and forward. And so, while I say so is that we have people that came from Senegal, and I spoke to them in camera. I said, no, you are now part of the DH community. He has been part, even though he's in Cameroon, he knows everything that happens here. He knows everything that happens here. And so he's benefiting, even though he was not with us in Netherlands, but he was supposed to be there. And so it is because he is part and parcel of what is happening there. So time and distances and space are not actually barriers. DH. You can say you can stay here and connect back to your roots. That's very important. So building community. As you are going back to Senegal, to Ghana, you will actually know that maybe Nigeria is not, we are not even as, you heard the first speaker talk about South Africa. South Africa has, in Africa, the richest infrastructure. The reason is because the government has invested. Our government can invest in festivals. Our government invests in festivals, in campaign posters, all those things. So it's very, but the South African government invested in building Sadela, and it has become a very strong and powerful infrastructure for DH practices. And so you will find that that is very important. But we are sure that in Nigeria here, some of us are Nigerians. If we articulate, I have told, if we articulate a good project, I'm sure that Third Fund will be interested in sponsoring it. Then number 3 is dissemination. Dissemination. He's accusing me that we forgot them.
Did you have a you had a question you have a question to ask?
You don't have, but you are what you're doing now.
No, you are hearing. Your video was off. Please go back. Go back. Go back. Go back. Go back. Dissemination. That means that somebody said we are not. So many people are not aware. So many people are not aware of what is happening in DH. I told Professor Tunde maybe where we forgot something is that we didn't use town crying. Some people outside Nigeria, we used to have town criers in the olden days. So I don't know if it is in Mali or in Senegal, but here, if you want to disseminate an information, it's an African, so somebody will have to ring bell. But on the internet, we use different media. We try to sensitize people. There are people you talk about digital humanities, they see it as antithetical. How can humanities be digital? How can digital be humanities? And so the osmosis nature of the discipline has made it difficult for people to even try. They don't even have the interest. So it's a problem, you understand? So, but dissemination means that your voice must be heard. When we were in Netherlands, we talked about voices, not just voice. But in Europe, they can talk about voice. We told them that Africa, our difference is actually our pride. And so we don't talk about voice. In Africa, we talk about voices. So once it is heard, people will hear you. And unfortunately, if you understand the parable of lizard, I fell from the tree and nobody praised lizard. Lizard said, anyway, if nobody praised me, I think lizard praised itself. So if you don't sing your song, it may be difficult to convince people that it is worth singing. And so that is why we are creating this opportunity. There's a journal. We were thinking that by this week, the journal would, could have been out so that people will see it. The Journal for Digital Humanities centered here. And so dissemination is very important. There are different, we have channels for dissemination. CEDHUL, CEDHUL is Association of Digital Humanity Organizations worldwide. So South Africa is already a member of CEDHUL. And so we are just trying to register the Digital Humanity Association so that once you do that, you will now begin the processes of being a member of CEDHUL. And being a member of CEDHUL, you have some privileges. And so that is quite important. But then another is advocacy. Advocacy. Advocacy is very important that it's just like blowing your trumpet. I think that is what it means in a layman's language. To create awareness and to sensitize people. I wrote the first proposal for DH in my school in 2013 when I came back from Oxford. And my dean asked me, what is digital humanities? And my dean, incidentally, is a professor of English. But she didn't understand. But, when somebody is very humble, she said she doesn't understand what it means. And so I sat down with her and educated her. But she became interested. And the proposal I brought, she said I had 5 names I proposed. She said she's going to be the 6th name on the list because she wanted the training too. You see, you can see some of our very senior people, they come here, they are listening. The reason is because they appreciate, they want to know more. There are certain things you learn, not really for yourself, but for the people you are training. And so our PhDs, if we don't train them the way we want, or the way the world wants them to be, they become handicapped. You won't compete. I told some of us that myself and the prof, we entered a room in Leiden, and so we sat together. I don't know whether you were there, but 2 of us, we sat, we listened to them make presentation. When we finished, prof looked at me, I looked at him, I said, Oga, did you understand what they were saying? And so we sat up. Because we saw a friend from US, he did a major in physics, a bias in mathematics, and then he has read biology. They now wanted to read English studies, English literature. When he did stimulation using narratology, Jerry Jeanette, that was what won the award in the whole DH, in the whole world. I was looking at him. The more you look at the more you look at it, the more confused you become. And yet it was very. I looked. He is aware. We looked at him. I said, "What was that his name?" Yes, but I think it was not Southern Carolina, but it was of the U.S. Ohio State University. When you see how they use narratology, that's what I was talking about theory. That theory does not mean that you are practicing DH. You don't have theories again, whether in linguistics, whether no, it's not the. He used narratology, Jerry Jeanette, and used it and did a modeling. When he finished the modeling of characters, everybody, people stood up and ovation, with strong ovation. You see, and he competed with so many projects. Yes, Sean. So you understand, the work is on net. You can actually find it. So what am I trying to say is that you see the way Oyibos he crisscrosses discipline. He applies and then we have very important as we are going back. In health, health humanities. There's actually digital humanities. There is also medical. So I know that the publication I did in Senegal was on medical humanities. Yes. And so you find you see him. See him there, that's the person I'm talking about. And so you write your own out like this. We're going to go through it this night. Yes, by tomorrow, we'll begin to look at it. Please, if you have not finished, write it in a full paper like this. You write your project, DH project, and then you write your name, and then your address. Please, it's very important. You can't keep learning, never coming to the knowledge of the truth. You can't keep learning. You have to. Please, it's compulsory. As long as you have been eating our food, it's compulsory. It's very important. This is a hand. It is good so that we make a critique of whatever you have written. You can correct yourself, and then from there you keep learning. This one I'm holding, I've already seen the challenges. Please. Please write out your approach. Okay, that is. Are you sure it is a project? It looks rather like a thesis. No. Okay. Okay, that's okay. Good. Go ahead, Walia. Collect from. Articulate your own. You see, the other group, it is like a marginal group, but they are more active. if I tell you to make a proposal, you know, an abstract can actually be a proposal. But you don't start writing. You must have a concept in your head before you write an abstract. You make a proposal. I only wanted to know how you think after what you have learned yesterday and today. Can I have a viable topic or subject? That's what I wanted. A viable one. Right now. Yes, now. Right now. Just a topic is enough. Okay. No. I didn't mean I meant in length. What of your name? Make sure you put your name. Make sure you put your name and address. In case you are winning award. You mean in case after I do an endowment, after this and then I announce that there is a prize of so. If you don't have name, how can I give it to somebody? Yes, you see, this is interesting, sir. Very good, sir. Thank you, sir. You see what I'm telling you? We're going to look at it. You know, my students, undergraduate, the person that will make the highest grade, I used to take them out. Or I will monetize it and say how much the best food they eat in the town. If you tell me the price, I will give you to go and eat it. Yes. In India, if you have A grade from kindergarten to the highest level, there is a prize. Yes? Our time is running out. The time you produce an information is part of training. Because this is 21st century. I was planning a project, DA project. I kept postponing. By the time I googled internet, I saw it already. It's the 21st century, you have to think very fast. Oh. Why are you looking at that? I'm not going to look at it. It's okay. Yes. Okay. Okay. No, tomorrow more activities. We will have to keep doing activities until because you may take some questions. If your own it's like when I get back, I'm going to have a meeting with my team. We're going to brainstorm on projects. And so if you produce this, you have to defend it. Whatever comes from your brain must be defended if we are going to invest in it. Yes. Okay. Don't worry, just write. Bumi, it's not later you are writing now. You just the way you are sitting down, relaxing, writing it. Is it later? Yes. Okay. You see, some of them are very interesting as I'm seeing. You see, Yes? Anybody remaining? Okay. Okay. You see, in formulating topics, there are skills too. There are methods. Yes, that's why I say it's good. It's hard on. We start from there. How many? Is it not? Was it four? The next one is you. You are the objective. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay. Hmm. Good. Some of them are very interesting. No, it's truly. You see where? Who is remaining? Did you submit your own? No. Let me tell you that this is going to be condition for your eating. Oh. Okay. No, one. Have you submitted? Okay, no, you have submitted. Okay. Okay. It's all right. I've got, we are going to go through tonight, and then tomorrow, it's possible. We,
to prepare the youth to be able to be at par with other people.
these are potential topics, research topics in DH.
That's why I remain very grateful to this project.
You didn't hear?
I have also, I'm so sure.
But he brought some.
Please,
we can now, we'll get down to, we can get down to our normal center for.
I would describe digital humanities as
for food. I know you wanted me to complete it.
Methodologies and digital technology to
I know you don't, like me,
research
we don't
in
eat much.
the humanities and social sciences.
No.
I couldn't find exactly what I was looking for, but I think to summarize one of the first questions, what is the
James,
it's just about
okay, you can look at, you can as well watch, this is our, this thing on, we carried out in 2019, Netherlands.
I think a lot is in the process of change because the technology is so integrated in our everyday lives.
Leah Jong, University of Cape.
Sometimes realize. So I think for anthropologists dealing with
you know him, you know Ibrahima.
It's really crucial to capture this
Mali.
at this point in time.
I come from a country that is in transition.
They have a time, tomorrow is 9. Please ensure that tomorrow, the program, what time is in the program? 9, yes. So please, endeavor to be here by 9. Thank you so much. You have been wonderful today. Have a very good night rest. Eat. If you need to stroll within, please do. Tomorrow, we are heading for the opening ceremony.
So to me,
Remember that tomorrow is the opening ceremony. And so we are not going to be here.
I don't know whether it makes sense. You know, it reconnecting us with maybe the core goal of the humanities, that is dealing with the human.
So digital humanities is going to bridge the different disciplines in the African continent, that one thing. The second one is that it is also going to help us work with the new technologies within these disciplines, which are normally away from new technologies.
What I think is really powerful about the digital humanities is how it can integrate quantitative and qualitative data. And I think that it's particularly relevant in cultural heritage.
So how technology affects how we engage with cultural heritage, how we document it, how we preserve it, and particularly African cultural heritage. So that's my contribution and my background to being here today.
So what I did for the workshop, I basically pulled together all this data onto a Google map so that people can actually see that there is actually a lot happening in Africa. It's not as one would imagine, because usually the literature on digital humanities scholarship in Africa talks about all the challenges, about, I don't know, lack of infrastructures, electricity, access to the internet, but actually there is a lot happening.
I think Africa is more resourceful sometimes because we do have certain limitations in terms of maybe access to good broadband or access to funding, so it forces us to think creatively with what we have.
I think the advantage for us is that the rest of the world is sort of like transferring their work into the digital age, you know, because a lot of work has been done, and so it's more of a transference into a digital form. But for us, I feel like we are creating.
Africa is a creative continent. You can see the type of projects the people are articulating. We are not exposed to much tools,